Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name's Tom Hickmott. I'm a Business Development Manager from Promus, and I'm your host today. Firstly, before we get into the webinar, I'd like to thank Business Review Webinars for organising this on our behalf today. They've done an outstanding job in getting such a high level of interest in the topic that we're due to speak about today, and that is how to get started with RPA and why now is the time to implement. I'll shortly hand over to the speakers. Before I do that, I shall talk through how to answer questions, or ask questions in the webinar. And the two speakers today, as you can see on your screen, are Eileen O'Mahony. She's the General Manager at Promus, and also Mindaugas Maduras, who's the Chief Architect here. So just before I hand over, I'll talk to you a little bit about the platform that we're using today. You'll notice the webinar is browser-based, so if you do happen to disconnect for any reason, please just click on the link that you received via the email to rejoin the session. Now, as we go along, you'll be able to ask questions, and you can send them in via the questions widget. Just type them into the box at the top right-hand corner of the screen and click Submit. We've allocated some time at the end of the session to address any questions or thoughts you may have. If you need any assistance along the way, if you just click on the Help widget, then we'll come to your assistance there. And you can move, resize and maximise any of the windows in front of you to get a better view of the slides as we go along. So without further ado, I'll now hand you over to Eileen to begin the webinar.
Thanks so much, Tom. Hi there, everyone. So I'm going to start a little bit about Promus first. Promus started out over 10 years ago. We started in the IT asset management space. Basically, everybody wants to know what IT assets they own, what they're worth, the state of their software license compliance, and so on. So that's where we began our business. After a relatively short period of time, we moved into ITSM, IT service management, and also into monitoring of IT devices. So a core part of our work became configuration management. Now, if you're an IT asset manager, you want to know what you own, but if you're a configuration manager, you want to know what it's connected to and what business services those configuration items are supporting, and also what impact on your business a change to a device might cause. So increasingly, we and also our clients became interested in automating configuration management, and that led us to DevOps tools and technologies. Now, making improvements for our clients through automation in the IT sphere led us to discussions and chats with them about how we could do the same for the business. You know, is there anything we could do for non-IT people, the HR, finance, legal departments, and so on? And that's how we ended up looking to RPA as the technology to do just that. So let's talk a little bit about what RPA is first. What is it? Well, as I said, it stands for Robotic Process Automation, but basically it's just software. Now, what that software does is it executes a series of tasks. Those tasks all make up a process, and typically that process is done by a human employee. So think of the obvious stuff like invoicing, payroll, think client onboarding. You know, all of those processes involve entering data into a computer application. So with RPA, instead of a human logging into the computer and going through the tasks, there's a piece of software, which is known as a robot or a bot, and the bot tackles the tasks instead of the person doing it. Now bots are capable of mimicking pretty much most human-computer interactions. So it doesn't really matter what the process is. You know, it could be a HR process such as onboarding lots of employee records into a payroll system, maybe after a merger, or it could be a financial process, you know, generating invoices. That's a very common one. You know, it doesn't matter because RPA is cross-functional. Also, what doesn't matter is actually the applications being used for the process. You know, you could build a bot to work with Sage, with SAP, with FreshBooks, whatever it is your accounting software is. You know, in the legal sector, it doesn't matter. LexisNews, Clio, Elite 3, I mean, whatever it is, RPA is both cross-functional and cross-application. So you need to think of RPA bots as co-workers. Just think of them as co-workers. They're programmed to take on certain transactions. They do some of the stuff that humans do. The difference is they do it better. And that's one of the things I want us to look at is, you know, what does better mean? Well, the thing about bots is if we look at the last year, bots are immune to crisis. They're immune to the upheavals that affect us humans. So it just doesn't mean anything to a bot. A bot will process data far, far quicker than a human can. Plus, it runs 24/7, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. They don't take coffee breaks. They don't get sick. On top of that, they're accurate. A bot never makes a mistake typing data. Now, you can include steps for your bot to pick up on data that's been provided that has errors. But the bot itself, the bot runs the process just the way you've asked it to every single time, exactly as directed, 100% every time, always, always, and ever consistent. So like I said, they don't get sick, they don't take holidays, they're utterly reliable. Now, on top of this, they can scale up or down as demand fluctuates. So that means that, you can, on top of that, you can use whatever applications you currently have in place. You don't have to change your accounting software. You don't have to change your case management system. You don't have to change your matters applications. Basically, RPA it's a non-disruptive technical solution. Now, let's just, for a minute, I'm just going to say, what is it they don't do? Well, they don't do the stuff that humans are really great at. The stuff that humans do is storytelling, creating plans and strategies, interviewing people, building relationships, the tasks that require creativity, ingenuity, invention. So RPA isn't about getting rid of human workers. It's about liberating humans from the boring, mind-numbing, repetitive tasks that actually don't make the best use of their intellect. It's about freeing up those humans to do more, to be more strategic, to be more agile, as I said, to be more inventive, to work towards true transformation. So what we see in the future is, on the left, you've got lots of people busy doing their work, but on the right, what we see is a combination of human workers and digital workers or bots, handling the processes such as service ticketing, document processing, contact service operations, and stuff like that, with the humans seizing opportunities, planning, and driving improvements. Now, something that comes up quite regularly is people get confused between AI and RPA. And I'm just going to ask Mindy as my colleague to talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I think in this particular case, the keyword is the cognitive services. So really, RPA doesn't do that. Even though people sometimes do mix them up, but the terms machine learning or smart analytics. But let's just talk on each of the concepts a little in more detail. On one hand, RPA in itself, it isn't capable of intelligent thought. Sure, it can do things quickly, but every process that RPA automates must be explicitly programmed by a human beforehand, so that the robot doing the automation knows exactly what to do. You can program the various steps or the logical operators. If this happens, do this, but that's nowhere near to what the AI's capabilities are. So that's why RPA in itself, without any AI capabilities, is ideal just for rule-based and highly repetitive tasks. Whereas on the other hand, AI is an umbrella for various software that can demonstrate intelligence and supplement RPA activities. So, for example, machine learning, which is a subset of AI algorithms, they can acquire knowledge and can learn from the data without being explicitly programmed for each prediction. So the idea of that is that the programmers are not constantly updating the system as with RPA, but that the system can process data and learn from the data on its own, given a large enough set of that data. So it's kind of looking at that many various examples of data and understanding the patterns. After a machine learning, what we call a model, is trained, it can make a prediction on the input of data without the intervention from any programmers. For example, Spotify uses machine learning. Everybody knows what Spotify is. And for example, when you listen to Spotify's music, machine learning uses your data to create playlists of music that it thinks you may enjoy. This particular machine learning task is called recommendations, and there are more applications I will talk in more detail later on. And what we know is that RPA plus AI is what's called intelligent automation. It's really important to mention that machine learning also can work not only on structured data, such as websites contents, Excel files, such as tabular data, which is said what is where and what, but it can also work on documents, on emails, on chat messages, video or audio documents, files. So given the capabilities I have just outlined in machine learning, the applications of AI are quite broad here. So one of them, for example, in emails, it could be a sentiment analysis on emails, which would say, well, if an email that is coming in is the contents of that email, the sentiment is very low, you may want to forward that email to a certain manager, or you may want to forward that email to a certain category, or a folder, for example, or a certain triage group in a team. AI can also detect, for example, in the documents, any sensitive information and perform data obfuscation, which is essentially kind of removing any sensitive personal information within any documents you want to have a look. Additionally, it can look at various images and recognize objects and location of the image. So, for example, explicit content detection. And as we've mentioned in Spotify's case, it can make recommendations based on your previous patterns of behavior. And to start with AI, it's too like broad a term, but the quickest way to do that is by using various managed services from the major cloud providers, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, that provide programmatic access that can be used with RPA bots to kind of you pick up a certain workflow with a bot, pick up a document, and use that document against an input of a machine learning model to receive your desired type of prediction. So in today's large enterprises, unstructured information represents the majority of all business data, and it is the hardest to process. So the speed of RPA bots, together with AI cognitive capabilities, can really make a huge impact in how do you tackle this vast amount of data. So you can pass multiple documents to a bot via email, for example, or on a shared drive, and the bot can then read the email, open the attachment, read the attachment, take the details of those multiple attachments, and based on what it has read, populate the data in an Excel sheet and send someone an email. Remember, I said, for example, make a prediction based on a content. And then most of these cases that Eileen will mention today are either ones built by the employer Promus that also use some of the cognitive AI capabilities, or are built by our partners, or in some use cases, they are the creations that are now available on RPA marketplaces. And with pre-built bots is the fastest way to get started with both RPA and AI, because the solutions, a lot of them for very typical use cases, are already available within reach and require very minimal configurations. Eileen will go through the various use cases. These will be those that have come about to the pressures created by COVID. Eileen, to you.
Thanks so much, Mintigas. That's great. That's a really clear description of how I can distinguish between RPA and AI. So as Mintigas said, the first two use cases I'm going to mention, they're really topical. They're ones that came about because of COVID. Now, this one here, this is really interesting. So the challenge was for it's a major South American bank. Now, under normal circumstances, what would happen is that late payments on loans would trigger a negative impact on a customer's credit rating. So, we all know that's the way banks operate. Now, as a response to COVID-19, what the bank did was it announced a new loan process that would help manage late payments. What they wanted was that late payments would not send the credit notice to credit rating agencies. The real challenge was how they were going to implement this. So the bank had done some analysis, and what they'd worked out was that manual updates of loan records took about 3 minutes each. So this was going to take a team of 100 people around 2 years to actually implement this new scheme, and it was going to cost millions. So how are they going to manage this? Well, the solution came via a bot. the really amazing thing with this was the solution was developed and tested within a matter of weeks. Well, the design was done within a matter of days. When they finally rolled out the solution, there was zero bank disruption, there was millions saved in labour costs, and what was key to any bank operating under the circumstances of COVID over the last year was they had, in terms of brand and reputation and customer satisfaction, they scored very, very high. I'm going to talk about another use case now. Similar thing. Some organizations who were really impacted by COVID, airlines. With one particular airline, the issue for them was they were hit with a huge surge in cancellations once the pandemic broke out. And the employees weren't actually able to handle the increased demand due to calculations. Now, that meant there was a negative impact in terms of customer experience and, again, in terms of the brand. And they were having fines triggered for non-compliance. On top of this, to reduce the cash outflow, the airline added an e-voucher scheme. So there was an e-voucher refund option. Now, this meant there was an increase in the complexity of the processing that had to be done. So the employees were actually already having increased demand on them. Plus, there was a new process to try and cater for. So, yet again, a bot came to the rescue. Now, what the RPA solution, the bot did was it would extract, very similar to how Mindigus was describing earlier, it would extract ticket information from customer emails, and then it would open up booking and refund applications and validate the passenger name record, the passenger's customer itinerary, the airline reward scheme they might be on, coupon statuses, and so on. And at the end of the outcome of the bot was they would issue an e-voucher. Now, all of this was done without any increased employee headcount. So where the airline found themselves was in a position to process 4,000 requests daily instead of the 500 that they were maxing at with human employees. There was a 700% increase in processed customer requests. And there was also an improved cash flow because the e-voucher scheme was operating so efficiently. In fact, the e-voucher processing scheme it dropped from 20 minutes per item to process to less than 2 minutes. So, I mean, it's just transformational, the kind of impact a bot can have in a situation like that. So what some of you would love to see now is, well, what does a bot look like? It's quite hard to envisage what a bot looks like because it's almost like the invisible man sitting at a computer screen. Mindigus, can I just get you to show us what a bot looks like?
Sure. A piece of advice, don't blink when watching. So it's very quick. You may see that the contents of an Excel spreadsheet are displayed. What the bot is going to do is take whatever is in the Excel spreadsheet, and it is going to populate the data within the web form. An RPA challenge is a benchmark to show how quickly the robots can process various repetitive tasks. In our case, you have seen that the whole Excel spreadsheet has been processed in 10 seconds. But that's only because after each action, I have put a 1 second delay. It usually would have processed in half a second. So even blinking sometimes doesn't take that long. So this is just to show that for trivial tasks, such as data entry, even for large files, it would be super quick. Such a simple bot is very easy to implement. And it just shows that to start with what usually takes manually a very long time, just imagine copy and pasting things with the robot. So the one record takes perhaps 1/10 of a second to process, and compare that to how usually a person may need to input data into various forms. So this is just to show that the robot with such a quick win robot can save huge amounts of times overall.
The other thing, Mindigus, I love about it, of course, is the accuracy. The bot is never going to make a mistake. You're not going to have time dragging on with that, people correcting mistakes.
Oh, yes, 100%.
Yeah. So one of the things, I'm going to talk a little bit now about the legal sector specifically. Now, there's no denying that 2021 was a challenging year for law firms. And I just want to touch on what lies ahead. So, because all of us believe here at Dublin Promus that when you consider some of the challenges you have to tackle, RPA is actually a tool that's going to deliver some solutions for you. Before I talk about the future, let's just talk about the obvious. If it was 18 months ago and we were talking about the challenges ahead, who would have listed global pandemic? Now, for some of our clients, when COVID did land, having RPA in place was actually a lifesaver for them. I can think of one particular example. They're a UK-based producer of artisanal spirits and beers. And prior to COVID, they had implemented a bot who was helping with their online sales. They had a massive surge in online sales during the course of the pandemic, and they're very clear that actually they couldn't have delivered their business if they didn't have bots in place to do the processing. Right, back to the legal sector. There has been a lot of comparisons between the COVID-19 recession and the 2008 crash. But it's clear now that the impact on the legal sector is actually nowhere close to the level of severity that happened way back then. But there certainly are challenges ahead. The obvious one is ensuring sustainable and profitable growth. There's never been a greater emphasis on achieving efficiencies than now. And with RPA, the mantra really is doing more with less, the same mantra that we're hearing in the law sector at the moment, because that's what RPA gives you. It actually gives you increased productivity without raising your human employee headcount. So with the profit pressure, along with the impact of COVID-19, most law firms are saying they're not predicting new hires and possibly not expanding throughout 2021. But what you're actually seeing with RPA is that you can have increased productivity despite no new hires. And there's a very low cost actually associated with that. So let's look at the other challenge you're facing in terms of workforce experience. All of us, I mean, here at Dublin Promus, we certainly saw there was a shift in how we worked. You know, there was more remote working, you had less centralized teams and so on. And people had to be a lot more flexible about the hours that were available because schools were closed and people have families to care for. So it's really going to be interesting to see what will happen when all the restrictions are lifted. Now, aligned with that, of course, what we've found is people's well-being. And there was a survey done by insurance firm Productivity, and it's found that actually the legal sector continues to struggle with well-being compared to other professions. The figure they give is that 63% of legal professionals report daily stress. Now, this is the second highest figure in the country. So it's something that the legal sector are certainly taking in due consideration about. So rather than the employee well-being being secondary to the needs of the business, it's really seen as a business issue because we're so cognizant of the fact that a lack of well-being support does lead to poorer productivity. So this is somewhere where RPA can step in. It can step in to alleviate the burden of doing menial tasks. It also is part of what will attract the right workforce because you're building a culture that meets your employees' expectations of what's provided, what tools are provided with them to do their job. So there is a morale boosting impact of having RPA within your organization. Right, mergers in 2020. Mergers in 2020 fell to a 9-year low, right? However, the predictions now, market experts reckon that merger activity is about to heat up. For those of us who work in IT, one thing we know is that mergers bring a lot of stress because you have dual IT systems, you have dual sets of data, dual sets of processes. If you just think about it, you've got dual payroll systems, you've got dual case management systems and so on. Also, and it is fair to say within the legal sector, a lot of the systems that are in use are legacy systems. They're old systems, they may not have an API, but what they do have is data that's critical to the business. And RPA is something that can step in here. And I'm going to describe in a moment a use case where Promus actually used RPA to migrate data from one legacy system to another. Now, obviously, there's the obvious alternative solution, which is to build an integration solution. But we all know they're not building something in the back end is never a quick route to success. Whereas bots are relatively quick to build. Right, let me move on to customer experience. It's certainly true that in the coming years, we're likely to see new types of legal services offered. You know, there's a lot of interest still in the co-op legal, you know, since 2012 when they became one of the first ABSs, because the customer experience now is there is a sort of an expectation of a supermarket legal sort of service expectation. On top of that, over the course of COVID, people they're used to a sort of a shift, a technological shift. They're used to their experience being driven by technology. And this shift matters. It means people have got higher expectations of how they will work with the business and what their professional services providers can do in terms of, you know, paperless workflows, about the speed with which things can be turned around, the speed with which they would even get a response to a communication or an email that they send in. Now, Mindigus mentioned to you about the fact that inbound emails can be checked for the sensitivity of the message. And this is the type of thing you can use an RPA bot to do, to just quickly respond to a customer or to quickly notify somebody who needs to be aware of the fact that a customer seems less than satisfied. Now, the last one's a biggie, IT investment. So, without a doubt, cybersecurity is high on everyone's agenda, and not just for 2021, but well beyond that. That's a given. But let's talk, that is a whole area that everyone's looking at. But what else? So if we reflect for a moment, just think for a moment on how automation transformed manufacturing. There is a parallel here in terms of services. An awful lot of the legal work is routing of data, it's repetitive, it's process-based. And processes can be broken down. Just the way it was done years ago in the manufacturing sector, you can disaggregate the process, just like you did with manufacturing, and work out what's the most efficient way to get to the output, to get to the end deliverable that you want from the process. So it may be that you have a bot or PA delivering segments of the overall process with humans delivering other parts. And, Promus aren't alone in thinking this, because according to PwC's law firm survey, the most recent one, improving the use of technology remains one of the top 3 priorities over the next 12 months. But in addition to that, standardizing and centralizing processes and improving legal service offering by doing that, they're right up there as well. So there's a clear link here to the core concepts of RPA. There's a clear link between what RPA intends to do and what the legal sector see as desirable. So, let me move on to a particular use case that we worked on in the legal sector. So there was systems migration. So you can picture your legacy system. We thankfully at Promus, our investment in IT, we don't actually have a lot of legacy systems, but we do work with a lot of big banks and insurance and so on. Similar to law firms, legacy systems abound. They have higher maintenance costs. They tend to perform poorly. There's a lot of technical limitations. And compounded with that is they're terrified of losing the data on those systems. Everybody's keen to move to a new system, something that's scalable, something that offers a better performance, something that's much more efficient. It's got, lower maintenance costs and so on. However, that's not as easy done as said. So what complications are you facing? No API. That's something we do see with legacy systems. There's no API, and therefore integrating from one system to the other or moving data from one system to the other is challenging. The other bit is that the system's actually required. You need access and uptime. So to take down the system and say it's unavailable because you're actually shifting data isn't necessarily an option. You might have a small change window which you can do it, but you certainly don't have months at hand. So financially, RPA is actually a better way to tackle this. It's feasible on any budget, because what RPA does is it gives you a front doorway to transfer the data from one system to another. You don't need APIs, you don't need new architecture, you don't need system downtime. And in fact, in the same vein, integration is feasible with this front door approach. The other thing is, because bots enter the information in the same way that humans do, there isn't the concern about system controls being bypassed. That's the thing with moving directly to database moving data. Your system controls for the application, checking that certain fields are validated, checking that there's cross checks between one table and another, that tends to be at the GUI end often. And because the bot is moving data through the front door, all those system controls stay intact. The other thing with system integration is you typically have really rigorous testing. So there's no doubt that you might find with the back end or system integration, once it's running, it might be faster, but what's the cost of that? It mightn't even be feasible. So RPA really is your rapid design to delivery solution with regard to this. There's not a lot of computer coding required. The building blocks of RPA are usually ready available, and it also has a pretty low, initial purchase price. So this was all of those winning benefits, all of those positives was the reason that our client chose RPA as the way to migrate from one system to the other. I can't quite recall. I think it was a ticket system. Or I think the system is called Ticket, which is one of the legal processes, one of the legal applications widely used. Right, I'm going to talk about some more use cases here. So they're not specific to legal processes. They're certainly used by the legal sector, and they're the back office and financial processes. This is where Promus built a lot of bots initially, and it's really where automation has made great strides, and it's quite obvious why. If you just think about it, like accounting processes, order to cash, procure to pay, finance transformation, all of that type of thing, they require collection, analysis of large amounts of data, they're rule-based, they're repetitive, and so on. So, RPA, really, it's a match made in heaven for that type of thing. I mean, on top of that, accuracy is critical, and that's where bots win out on humans. We'll look at a couple of specific examples here. So invoice processing. If you think of accounts payable, what you normally have is an employee retrieves an electronic invoice from an email. They download the attached invoices into a folder. They log into their accounting software. They create the bills there, and so on. Now, an RPA bot can easily do that. Can retrieve the invoices within an email or as an attachment, reads the invoice, processes the invoice, extracts the required information, supplier name, invoice number, due date, all of that kind of stuff, and then it loads that into the accounting system. Now, if there was issues with the inbound data, for example, there might be a mistake in an inbound invoice, for example, a supplier's details aren't recognized, that's fine. You can make sure that your bot is coded to recognize where there's an anomaly or an error, and the bot can send a notification to the manager, a little bit the way somebody who's newly joined the organization would say, to their manager, what do I do? There's an invoice here and I've got an issue with the supplier code not being recognized. You'd basically train the bot to know what to do when that happens. In our experience, what we're looking at is a reduction in about 60% of the time, invoice processing cycle times. So I'm going to mention accounts receivable. Now, this is one that's very much to my own heart because it's something we've done here for ourselves at Promus. So we're a boutique consultancy, and our activities, they're similar to law firms in that we generate invoices based on the amount of time our engineers might spend working on a project. So you'd imagine what we have to do is it's not just the hours they spend, we also have to take into account the expenses that are incurred. So this requires a lot of cross-checking in various systems. Logged hours may be in a client spreadsheet or they might be on an internal system of our own. The expenses are on a separate system. And there's always the sanity check that has to be done, checking that somebody wasn't on holiday, that they weren't absent, in case somebody's filled out in timesheet mistakenly and so on. Because just like law firms, our reputation is critical. So it's important that the accuracy of the invoices is there. Now, this is a chore. It's a once a month activity. It's a huge burden on our financial team. And we now have a bot. We have Annabot. Annabot now does all of this for us. Annabot is the one that downloads the details about timesheets and expenses and so on. So now Anna, our wonderful Anna in admin, she looks after the errors. She looks after where someone's made a mistake in an invoice and so on. Right. Quotes. This was another thing we did for clients. One of our clients is a global multi-brand supplier of IT systems, and part of what they do is producing quotes. And what they had explained to us was that actually their sales team say there's a bottleneck. The bottleneck was actually creating the quote. They have large lists of supplier prices they have to go through. There's various discount codes offered to various clients and so on. So getting the quote provided by the team, and also the headache if there was a mistake made in a quote that went out was, it was just such a burden on the organization. So what we did was build a bot for them, a bot that could deliver a quote. The bot could deliver the quote 20 times faster than a person could. And the really important thing was there was no errors. The bots never make an error. So there was none of this sort of trolling back over an event that had gone wrong. Now, I'll just quickly mention reporting as a last kind of use case. Obviously, we couldn't possibly go through all the use cases, but these are ones that every firm needs this type of thing. So again, reporting something that everybody does. One of our clients, they run huge end of quarter reports. They're a global organization. And what they are doing is they actually extract data from multiple systems. Now, they do have several reporting tools. They even have some they've built in-house themselves. But there was a lot of manual aggregating of the data and playing with the data that used to go on. So what we did was build a bot, and the bot actually generates the same output, but with far less effort. It extracts data from several systems. It adds the extractions plus some calculations to various spreadsheets. And within the spreadsheet template, there's charts that will indicate what's happening, the analysis trending to be seen. Now, once the process, the bot has done, aggregated the data and produced the output that's required, it sends an email with the report attached to a particular group who need to see those reports to use them for their own roles. Now, not only were the people who are producing the reports very happily relieved of their duties, but the delight was those recipients of the reports because they said there was less trawling through stuff that seemed slightly less than accurate. I'm going to move on to legal process specifically. So it might be that you're already using RPA. You may already have bots in place delivering you value. For those of you who don't, or even for those of you who do, can we just reflect on typically the criteria for processes that make something suitable for automation? If you've got a process that's rule-based, if it's data-heavy, if it's a repetitive process, that does lend itself nicely to RPA. Now, don't be stuck with the idea, when I say repetitive, don't be stuck with the idea that you have to do this over and over again in so much that the process has to be done. It just may, for example, when I talked about system migration, it might be that you only migrate once, but the data, each record has to happen once, then the next record, the next record, the next record. You might have thousands and thousands of data records to do that. So that's the repetition element. Now, it may be that you have a process that's not a once-off. Okay, like the ones we mentioned already, accounts receivable and so on. You have lots of data you're processing, the repetitiveness of that, and you also have the process itself. So from what we've been describing, what does RPA do really well? Okay, it's terrific at opening emails, attachments, it does data entry, it processes data super quick, it can move files and folders, it can copy and paste stuff, scrape data, it'll connect systems, it'll do calculations for you, if then, make decisions for you, and then as Minda has described, with the arrival of AI technology, it can do lots of other clever stuff like trying to work out whether or not you should interpret the sensitivity of an inbound email and so on. So if you take all of this, if you keep all of this in mind, to what I would think, it leads you to consider what use cases in legal. Now, I've put up a couple here that I think would be spot on. So sanctions checking, right? Sanctions checking. So it's an obligation to regularly check online sanctions databases to determine, are you in a position to offer your services to potential customers? Now, that's a rule-based task. Okay, it's the type of thing a bot does very well. Scan and search through multiple online and offline data, analyze and process different types of documents, data sources, and so on. Apply some predefined rules, keywords, check through keywords that might be of interest, organize and log the findings for compliance purposes, and then let somebody know, notify a person that this activity has been done. So that type of compliance reporting, there are activities that are frequently underway in a business. And the accuracy, again, I keep mentioning this, the accuracy is critical. You know, I think that's very much a thing a bot can do. Now, on the same theme, something we were talking to one of our clients about recently, claims checking. So, as you know, it's a statutory requirement that solicitors check the claims records of prospective clients before they take that client on. Now, again, a bot's easily able to check the claims and underwriting exchange. So it can be checked to see the details of any claimants, and then you can notify the relevant paralegal of the results of the search. Now, obviously, there's a time saving on one search, but if this is part of your core business, there's a huge time saving done on all of the cases that you might, or all of the incoming claims requests that might come in. Onboarding, right? This is actually a very typical bot. An onboarding bot is atypical. In fact, at the moment, Promus we're working with an NHS trust that handles a suite of processes that are really around onboarding. Now, the suite of processes actually deals with literally the beginning, in the initial advertising of the post, right through to the fulfillment of the post. In fact, it goes beyond that. It's so much embedded with their HR activities. We've got a process that looks after the leavers as well. In many respects, onboarding a new employee, there's a similarity there with onboarding a new client. You know, if you think about it, the applications are different, that's fine, but there's common activities. You're transferring data from emails, from documents, from websites. You're inputting data to a HR system or a CRM system or a client management system, whatever it is. And then once that's done, you're notifying somebody that that data is available for use, that those persons' details have been onboarded and so on. So I believe there's scope there for you to look at how a bot can improve the productivity within your organization in terms of onboarding. And again, new matter requests. So it doesn't matter, I keep saying this, it's cross-platform, cross-application. Whatever your matter management system, it will still involve consolidating and documenting various checks and considerations, you know, capturing essential details of the matter, conflicts of interest, risk assessment, all that type of stuff, financial details, joint instructions, and so on. That's regardless of the matter management application you're using. So the bot really doesn't care, as long as it's the process the bot cares about, and the process really does involve rule-based tasks that any bot can do. Conflicts of interest, right? This is a really big one. So the old days of, binders contained client data, opposing parties, associated contracts, and so on. Those old days of binders are long gone, and firms are using technology now to maintain records. And many of those solutions they use, they do assist with conflict checking. I know that just to think off the cuff, Clio and LexisNexis have got built-in search functions and so on. Now, what a bot can do for you really does go beyond this, because what a bot can enable you to do, and for those of you that don't already have that technology, or who aren't satisfied with what they're currently doing, what a bot does let you do is search for text within documents and their meta descriptions. You can search contracts, contacts, matters, matter notes, billing records, anything else you specify. And on top of that, you can generate a report. So what the bot can do is turn conflict checking, into a process that runs in seconds with the report at the end of it. The heart of conflict checking is consistency. Thorough researches, checking the records the same way and thoroughly each time. So this is an area the bots are already being used for in major law firms. This is already something that's being done. Automating this process is a set of bot tasks. It frees your paralegals, it frees your staff from scanning emails and databases. They can get on with the building and the heavy lifting that requires creativity and so on. Right, I'm going to just mention as well here case management. So one of our partners actually already has a marketplace bot out there that handles case management updates. I'm just going to describe it for you here now really quickly. So the law firm receives routine court notices for each case. Now, these could be for hearings that get scheduled, or there could be steps within the case management that the court administrator is either recording or that have occurred, and or it might be that they're notifying them that they will occur. Now, instead of having an employee regularly check inbound emails with these notices, a bot can handle it. The bot can read the email, the bot can process the attached PDFs, log into whatever case management or practice management system you're using, and file whatever incoming in the emails into the appropriate case file under the client and also in the actual case matter. And on top of this, it can then notify the professional working on the case, the solicitors, the paralegals, and so on, that this has been done. So the benefits are obvious. The speed, we're talking about reducing processing time to seconds, 17 seconds or so, instead of the minutes that it takes. It's still, if you've got a human doing it, this is going to take a minimum 5 to 10 minutes each time. The other really key bit is the accuracy. I keep saying this, but it's the perfect handling of emails, perfect handling of file attachments and so on. Always looking up the client and case, the case lookups and placements exactly. No human errors, no distractions, no delays. Right. What about the last thing I've mentioned here about document validation? Right, we've also got a bot that will extract clauses from master contracts agreements and will compare that against customer signed agreements with the intention to ensure that there's no tampering that's occurred. Now, if there is tampering that's occurred, what happens is the anomaly, the difference between them is captured and an email is sent to the appropriate paralegal or other professional notifying them that the check is complete and an anomaly has been found or not found. And if so, what is this? Right, so it is hard to know where to start if you haven't already started on RPA, and it's hard to know if legal processes is where you should start. But certainly if that's something you're looking at, if you look at processes that require receipt, routing, storage, recording of contracts, new matter requests, all that kind of stuff, that is a good place to start looking at. Mindigus, I'm going to ask you to jump in here now. I am going to talk about where you should start, but I think at this stage people are probably asking themselves, so how does a bot get built? Can you just quickly take us through that, Mindigus?
Sure. Before just mentioning on what the steps actually are, it's also worth mentioning what the bot delivery benefits besides the bot itself are. So one of them is kind of a byproduct, is that the process discovery is a good opportunity for process improvement and documentation of your processes. So usually if you don't get any projects involved in your day-to-day processes, you don't care about quite often. You may not care about who is doing what within the process. It works. But when you have started with the RPA journey, you do need to have a look at who is doing what the responsibilities are, what the system access requirements are. This allows you to record on who is doing what within the process, and then it allows you to identify the places where you can speed up the process as within what activities are taking place. So it's not only that the robot itself does things quickly, but the robot, the RPA discovery allows you to identify the inefficient spots within the process itself. So it's a pleasant byproduct of the RPA delivery project. So to start with, and this is where those problems kind of become evident, we start with discovery, where we clarify what the process is and identify what the requirements of the customer are. Basically, we look at what are the systems involved, then we speak with the subject matter experts. We may or may not use, depending on applicability, the automated process discovery tools that come with the tool of choice. Then we suggest what the improvements are of the process. Then after we've identified the key points needed to improve, then we can code what the process is. So we can use, for example, draw a visual-like diagram. We can use the drag and drop, for example, various tools for the quick delivery of the bot. So it just shows what steps are taken in what sequence, so by just looking at the diagram, and what applications are accessed. And then, based on this, the developer can flesh out what is required. So the implementation is more like I mentioned, with the drag and drop. It is creating the business rules that are to be performed once the robot is running. And after the robot is done, we move on to the next step, which is testing. So typically we test against the data that has been used in the past transactions, so in the customer system, as this gives us the chance to pick up on what the anomalies might be. And we also then walk through with subject matter experts who were advising us in the initial stages of the project, whether or not that has been developed does fit their needs and has everything been understood. And then we walk through them literally, say via screen sharing tools, how they think the process, does it work for them? And then also they can spot any issues, what should happen if anything goes wrong. For example, what happens if, for example, the robot loses access, say, midway through when the browser crashes? What does the subject matter expert think that the next step should be? So what, for example, what do we need the automation then to do next? Send an email, a notification, log this into a report. So the testing not only allows us to automate the steps, but also it allows us to proactively inform the involved parties on if something has gone wrong. So, everything is monitored end to end. And then after the testing has confirmed that process and the robot do fit the purpose, we perform the deployment. So there are two types of deployments that we can do. One is for the type of robots that do not need any attendance, any guidance. For example, such a robot that monitors a mailbox or a certain network drive for various files and performs activities, just perhaps copy and pasting data into different systems or moving files around. They don't need any human intervention. They can work on demand, or they can work on a predefined schedule. Then the next type of deployment could be that we can make a robot such that it may require a man in the middle. So say a robot runs, it performs a certain amount of steps, and then it can run on, say, a person's laptop, and then it can prompt with an input fields to input some data that the user may want the bot to take, and then use that in the subsequent deliveries, in the subsequent steps. This way, we can say that the robot can be not only something that works on its own, but it can also work together with the person who may be key to the process and something that may not be automated. I think that's pretty straightforward. I didn't want to get too much into technical details.
Thanks, that sounds great. That's terrific. Thanks a million. So I suppose a lot of people are saying, right, where do I go next? What do I do next? What are the next steps? Right. So we did talk about what your challenges would be, and actually, one of these is identifying the suitable process. Now, I'm just going to say, I already know we've got a question coming from somebody saying, well, what volume of data do I need to decide is the right volume of data to say that something should be a process? Do you know what? and I know this sounds like a strange one, it's not necessarily always about volume. So it can sometimes be about the necessity. So the systems migration example I was giving you, it's true, you could have a human doing that, but then you've also got the issue around accuracy. So it literally does depend on a multitude of factors. One is the cost associated with timing. If it's critical to happen and you don't have human employees available to do it with the accuracy that you require, then RPA may be the desired route to looking at it. In some cases, the timing isn't critical. And we're not saying that if you have a repetitive process with a lot of volumes of data, that it's necessarily the one to go for an RPA solution. Okay, sorry, back to now identifying process. As I said, it's a huge challenge because often what happens is that the IT people we would talk to really have no idea who in the business is having to perform the kind of work that lends itself to RPA. And that's why it often helps to have an outsider, like someone like us, come in and talk you through the possibilities. Now, we've also found what works really well is brainstorming across departments, listening to what the war stories are, finding out where staff are drowning with data, also getting from management what's key to them in terms of accuracy. That they will know, even though they may not have a clear idea of what the people on the ground are doing in terms of providing those reports to them and so on. So it could be that actually it's the less frequent process, but it's the need for accuracy is very, very high. And therefore, that's why you're relying on RPA to be the best to deliver that. Right. I'm going to move on to vendor selection next, because there's so much innovation going on in the RPA market at the moment. Now, the big names are like UiPath, AA, Blue Prism, Edgeverve, and so on. But actually, this is only a few years old, this market. So we are expecting to see more players to actually enter the market. We actually partner, although we're vendor agnostic, we partner with the big players. We have a clear understanding of what the various offerings are. We do have an idea of what best suits people's needs. And what we also say to people, though, is it's not just the technical aspects of what a tool can deliver. You do need to take into account the total cost of ownership. You need to look at the support offerings. It's also worthwhile looking to see what the vendor offers in terms of its marketplace. What bots are already out there? Also, what training is on offer? Because you may decide to deliver bots in-house. You may decide that you come to someone like us to train your own internal developers and then develop your own bots. And sometimes what's hugely supportive is a vendor who actually provides fabulous training online and so on. Right. What about SaaS? We're actually seeing SaaS, RPA as a service. We're seeing this as a great sort of onboarding platform for organizations or business units that want to get started. It might be they don't want to commit to managing, new technology. It might be they want to look at their investment in a different way. Actually, for me, I think the best way to picture this is it's a little bit like outsourcing, right? So in the legal sector, in most sectors, it's common enough to use an agency to deliver some of the services, all right? It's common enough. And actually, what you're seeing as well as that is we're actually seeing with globalization, there's a shift in how outsourcing has been sent out to lower cost geographic regions, So you will see that accounting practices are certainly doing this. So it's common enough practice to take the work to where the costs are cheaper. It's what happened with manufacturing, and it is increasingly happening in the world of professional services. A SaaS robot is very similar to that. A SaaS robot is actually, Mindigus, can you show us a SaaS solution running? I think this would be really interesting for people.
Yeah, it would be my pleasure. This is something I've worked on, so like the back of my hand. So what you're seeing currently is the usual SaaS type of an application where you log in, see a dashboard of how the robots are running. You have the ability to manage a team who will be using the robots. So you see a person who has a certain robots assigned. This is role-based, so we can specify what users can see. If the user doesn't have enough robots, they can order any new robots. They have been added to their account. Robot processes, this is where you execute a robot. You choose the robot in a drop-down, provide your own inputs, provide scheduling, and the robot just runs. You can simply, after you've run a robot, you can set the schedule to occur every specific period of time, and the predefined robot just runs. So no technical knowledge is required. It's already pre-deployed in the discovery stage for you.
I love it. I love it, Mindigus. And actually, so what we're looking at is the benefits of RPA, such as accuracy, increased productivity, the consistency, it can be used for compliance, reliability. I just love it because on top of this, I actually don't have to worry about the technology underneath it. That's what SaaS has given me. I have absolutely nothing to worry about. I use it like a mobile phone. I have it on a monthly pay scheme and so on with none of the headaches that go on. Right. Here's the wake-up call, right? these pictures here, in 2011, Morgan Stanley came out with a huge bullish report on Tesla. Now, in the report, they had 2 pictures of Fifth Avenue in history. And what they were showing you was, this is how fast things change. And I think it's a great visual to keep at the forefront of your mind. Technology moves fast. Technology makes business improve fast. On the left, you're seeing New York City, no automobiles. There's one in the picture. On the right, a matter of a few years later, spot the horse? That's how quick technology moves. That's how quick technology will make business improve. And that means the competitive landscape changes. So listen, with RPA driving down costs by 20 to 40%, delivering 100% data accuracy, slashing processing times by 30 to 50%, increasing capacity by 35%, there's a real opportunity here. There's a real opportunity here to redeploy humans to higher value activities and let the bots do what they do. If you don't start now, when? That's my question. Tom, thanks so much. I'm going to hand back to you now.
Great, thanks for that, Eileen. Now, we have allowed some time for questions at the end. The presentations have overrun slightly there, so we don't have a huge amount of time left. But we do have a couple of questions. If anyone else does want to ask anything at all, there's still time to put the questions in. If we don't get to it today, we can follow up with you afterwards and answer the questions for you. If you do want to submit anything, there's the questions widget. So you just type the question into the box and click submit, and we'll get that through. We will follow up with everybody out that's attended afterwards anyway. But yeah, if you've got any questions there, we'll get to them as quickly as we can. So there's one here, either Eileen or Linda, you may want to take this one. How much does it cost approximately to build a bot, and are there incremental savings?
Right. Great question. Great question. So it's a little bit like how much does it cost to build a house? So it depends on what you want to do. What I can say is that relative to technology solutions, RPA tends to be on the lower end of the scale. A lot of the bots we build them in a matter of weeks. So you can imagine the difference between building an enterprise solution, which we've done lots of, or building a bot to deliver the management of a process. If you're building something in a matter of weeks, it's certainly at the lower end of the scale. But, do reach out to us. If you've got an idea of a couple of processes and you're wondering how much it will cost, just reach out to us. I hope that answered the question, Tom.
It did indeed. Thank you very much, Eileen. Yeah, and in terms of reaching out, the slide that you should be able to see now has got contact details on there if you do want to get in touch. But like I say, we'll follow up with everybody afterwards as well. Yeah, so that just leaves me to thank Eileen and Mindigus for the presentation today. That's fantastic. Thank you very much for that. And also to thank Business Review Webinars for organising this session on behalf of WM Promus. Thank you very much. You should all receive an email shortly telling you how you can access the on-demand version of this webinar in case you want to listen to it again or forward on to any colleagues. And you can access this through Business Review's website, which is www.business-review-webinars.com. Thank you all once again for joining, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.